Let's be real, we're all looking for peace, right? It's this deep, universal thing we all crave. Today, we're going to break down a really powerful sermon from Pastor Elvis that digs into a specific idea of what true peace is, and more importantly, where we can actually find it.
I mean, it's a huge question, isn't it? In a world that feels so full of conflict and anxiety, where do you even begin to look for peace that actually lasts? This sermon argues that there's one single ultimate source for a peace that can handle all the chaos the world throws at us.
So the whole sermon is built around this title, Prince of Peace, or in Hindi, Shantika Rajkumar. Now, this isn't a new idea. It actually comes from an ancient prophecy in the book of Isaiah, and the central teaching here is that this long-awaited leader is Jesus. Okay, to really get what the sermon's talking about, you have to understand this Hebrew word shalom. It's so much more than just the absence of noise or fighting. Shalom means a deep sense of completeness, of wholeness, of total well-being in every single part of your life. It's a huge concept.
All right, so here's our roadmap for this breakdown. We're going to start with the very foundation of peace, then see how it applies to our communities, our families, and across our entire lives, before we get to the ultimate source of it all. First things first, we have to start with the absolute foundation. The sermon kicks off by defining the very nature of God as the starting point for every kind of peace.
The teaching draws a really clear line in the sand here. On one side, God is presented as a God of peace, which means order, harmony, well-being. And on the other side, anywhere you find disorder, gossip, or chaos, the sermon argues God is just not in that. It's a pretty powerful way to look at things. And this idea isn't just pulled out of thin air, it's grounded directly in Scripture. This verse from 1 Corinthians is used as the foundational proof, the idea that God's very character is peace, not confusion. This is the bedrock for the entire sermon. So, now that we have the foundation, let's see how this is supposed to work in our communities. I mean, how does this peace actually function in a world that is, let's face it, often full of trouble? This is a super important point the sermon makes. This peace is not about escaping reality. It's not about finding some quiet retreat and hiding from the world. This quote is used to show that, yep, trouble is guaranteed in life, but there's a different kind of peace available right in the middle of it all. Then the sermon lays out this practical and kind of counterintuitive process for dealing with enemies. It says, first, you focus on your own life. You live in a way that pleases God. Then, step 2, God can actually step in and cause your enemies to be at peace with you. But, and this is a big but, step 3 puts the responsibility back on you. You still have to actively try to live at peace with everyone. Okay, from the community, the teaching zooms way in to what is often the most challenging place to find peace. The family. To show just how painful a home without peace can be, the sermon uses this incredibly vivid image. A contentious spouse is compared to the constant drip, drip, drip of a leaky roof. You know, that unending annoyance that makes it totally impossible to rest? And check this out, because this illustrates a huge shift in guidance. The Old Testament advice is all about physical escape. Literally, go live on the roof or in the desert to get away from the fighting. But the New Testament advice, as presented here, flips the priority to internal, spiritual peace. It suggests that if you can't fix it, it's better to let the person go. Peace becomes the most important goal. Now the perspective widens again. We're looking at how this peace is meant to stretch across not just situations, but an entire lifetime. The sermon basically argues for a cause and effect relationship here. If you orient your life toward God when you're young, the teaching says that will lead to a natural outcome of peace and rest when you're old, all the way to being able to face death without fear. And this is held up as the ultimate example. These are the words of Simeon, an old man in the Bible who, the moment he sees the baby Jesus, feels like his life's purpose is totally complete. The sermon uses this to show what it looks like to die in a state of perfect shalom, that feeling of wholeness and fulfillment. So, after exploring peace in our communities, in our families, and throughout our whole lives, the sermon brings everything back to one central question. Where does this peace really come from? And here it is. This is the heart of it. According to the sermon, the number one peace, the one that all other kinds of peace flow from, is peace with God. This verse is used to explain the idea that people are naturally separated from God, and that Jesus' whole purpose was to fix that relationship, creating the foundational peace that makes all other shalom possible.
So, to quickly recap the key areas, the sermon paints this really complete picture where this divine peace is meant to show up everywhere in our church community, in a chaotic world, even with our enemies, in our families, and all the way from youth until death.
And finally, it's not just about receiving peace. The sermon ends with a call to action. This quote reframes peace not as something you just have, but as something you do. The goal is to become a peacemaker, to actively create peace in the world. And that, the sermon says, is the ultimate sign of being a child of God. And that brings us to the end of this breakdown. The sermon covers so much ground, but it really leaves us with this final, challenging question. If you think about shalom not just as quiet, but as complete well-being, which part of your life needs it the most right now? Where would you even start?